As always, every Wednesday we go to the Boardwalk kind of hotline and we talk with the one and only Dave Weinberg for a Weinberg Wednesday here on the 97.3 ESPN. His extra point columns are over at 97.3 ESPN.com. If you're watching the show on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, you can see Dave live, the virtual flesh, as he joins us right now on 97.3 ESPN. Dave, how you doing this Wednesday?
Doing well, Josh. Just brushing up over rock, paper, scissors.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because a lot of us didn't have a lot of time to prepare for Howie and company to actually speak today. It kind of came as impromptu. Oh, by the way, we're speaking tomorrow kind of thing. And, you know, aside from the rock, paper, scissors thing with Nick Sirianni, Dave, one of the things I took away, the biggest takeaways for me at least to start with, is it seems to be very apparent that they're trying to make it look like, whether people want to believe it or not, that they're trying to act like there is a huge difference between what happened last year and what's happening this year with this team, with this organization. Because if I read into what Andy Weidel and Howie Roseman were saying, they're making it like, hey, man, you know, we're going to be different this year.
Well, it probably is different only because they've had a year to know how to conduct things virtually and via Zoom, what have you, no combine for the second straight year. They were kind of I don't want to say off guard, but it was such a unique situation last year. And this year, I think they're better prepared, as every team probably is. So I think that's the difference. But I'm not quite ready to say that that they made a mistake last year because of that and that they're going to be that much better in this year's draft. I mean, it remains to be seen, depending on who they pick.
Do you read anything to Howie Roseman saying that, you know, the jury is still out on the 2020 draft class, and he wants to see how Sirianni's coaches do with those players?
Not necessarily Sirianni and the coaches. I think even if Doug was still there, I think the jury's still out. I mean, Jalen Reagor showed some potential, but he was hurt a lot of the time, and no one knows what Jalen Hurts is going to turn out to be. So, you know, I'm not ready to automatically dismiss those guys as busts or what have you. I think there's plenty of room for improvement there, especially with Jalen Hurts, and I'm looking forward to see what he can do this year as a starting quarterback, if indeed he is, which I would assume he is, but you never know with Nick Sirianni, I guess.
No, you don't. And I think that's interesting you mentioned Sirianni because he is a former wide receiver coach. That is part of his background. And listen, he got excessively excited talking about wide receivers today. And I know people are, you know, saying this and that, but listen, at least the guy's got a pulse. Like, at least the guy has a passion and interest about something. And I'd rather him be passionate about coaching and about wide receivers than, you know, just getting up there sounding like Bill Belichick every day.
So what did you think of Gabe Kapler when he was here, just out of curiosity?
See, I was indifferent about Kapler because to me, Kapler was one of those guys where I never thought he was a fit for Philadelphia. I thought he was a strange hire. And I think there's a long-term possibility that Kapler has a much better coaching career with the Giants than with the Phillies just because of the fact that I felt the Phillies organization and the city was a bad fit for him.
Well, I think Sirianni's in the same boat, honestly. Okay. I think he's in over his head here. Certain guys are built to coach here, to play here, and I'm not quite ready to I just have my doubts about the guy. I haven't been impressed to this point. Maybe you have, and there's nothing wrong with that, I guess. Different strokes for different folks, but I think it's a disaster waiting to happen.
Is there anything specifically about what he said or how he's acted that makes you feel that way?
Just his overall attitude, I guess. I mean, I understand being enthusiastic and stuff, but like a couple of weeks ago, for example, lauding the praises of his brother as a high school coach. This rock, paper, scissors comment. I know you probably think it's taken out of proportion, but just why would you even bring that up? I just don't understand. It just seems like so. I understand being enthusiastic and being positive, but it just seems like he has that Gabe Kapler-esque positive spin on everything, and no one's earned a starting job. You really think Fletcher Cox has to fight for a starting job here? Miles Sanders, Dallas Goedert, Jason Kelsey, really? I mean, it just seems like he gives speeches that you would hear at a high school game.
Dave Weinberg joining us for a Weinberg Wednesday here on 97.3 ESPN at Dave Weinberg 19 on Twitter. Dave, with that being said, the one thing I did take away, this was just me, my personal opinion.
Sure.
I liked what he had to say about the wide receivers because I feel like his perspective on the receivers. Now, listen, maybe it's because he's just a really good wide receiver coach, offensive coordinator, and maybe he's not set out to be an NFL head coach. So maybe that's part of it. But, for me, when he talked about the X receivers, about like, listen, an X receiver is this. And when he said that, I'm looking forward to, maximizing what these guys do, I feel like that maybe this guy might be able to do better with the talent that's here than maybe Doug Peterson was, because maybe Peterson was better suited for other aspects of the coaching of the game.
Maybe, but don't you think Nick Sirianni should have more on his plate than just worrying about the wide receivers? He's not the wide receivers coach anymore. He's the head coach now. So you have to rely on your wide receivers coach to coach those guys up, and your offensive coordinator. I do think that, having the background as a wide receivers coach is going to come in handy. They have not had good wide receivers coaches in recent years. That's evident. You can go all the way back to, I guess, Greg Lewis for that. And, that I think the fault kind of falls on Doug Peterson a little bit, but I'm more of a Doug Peterson fan, I guess, than you are. I don't know, but I'm not willing to blame him for what went wrong.
I said I'm not a Doug Peterson fan because, in my opinion, they should have never fired him. They should have kept him. They should have found a way to keep him. I've been consistent on that. My thing with Peterson is that I just wonder sometimes, because of different things we've heard and different things we've read, that maybe Doug Peterson was in a no-win situation because of the fact of what happens in the front office, how it relates to the coaching staff. And it almost feels like after today's press conference, this was almost the Eagles' way of saying, we found a guy who matches what the front office likes with the coaching staff, and they may not work. That may be a bad thing because of the fact that maybe part of the problem is the front office and the people. Because no offense to Andy Weidel, he might be a great guy, but he said a lot of nothing today, as far as I'm concerned.
Right. Nick Sirianni is a great fit for them because he's their yes man. He's going to do whatever they tell him to do, and Doug had earned the right, I thought, to maybe have a little bit more say, a little more input into that coaching staff than Jeffrey Lurie evidently didn't agree with that. So that's why, all of Nick Sirianni's coaches are handpicked by Howie and Jeff. And maybe, I'm sure Nick had some input into it, but I just think they got the coaches that they wanted. And and I think Nick is a kind of a reflection of that. I mean, the fact that Nick had no other interviews until before the Eagles came calling, that tells you all you need to know.
Dave Weinberg joining us here on 97.3 ESPN on Weinberg Wednesday here on Game Night. Josh Hennig hanging out with you along with Dave as we do every Wednesday here on 97.3 ESPN. Dave, were there any positives or was it all negatives for you from the presser today?
No. I appreciate the enthusiasm and the fact that they seem to have really done their due diligence as far as the draft is concerned. Andy mentioned that they interviewed 120 players at the Senior Bowl, which is pretty impressive. They seem to be really doing their homework, but I would like to think they do their homework every year. And for whatever reason, it just hasn't panned out the way they were hoping to. So it remains to be seen if that happens this year. I mean, it looks like they've set themselves up to have a pretty successful draft, but then again, that was the case in the last couple of years, and it didn't work out that way.
Do you read anything into them suggesting they might go offensive line in this draft?
Not for the first round pick, I wouldn't think. I mean, I think you've probably talked about, that's not the so-called sexy pick, although they do need offensive line help. No question about that. However, they're in a position now, I think, where you can't take a guy to groom with that first round pick now. You have to get a guy who's going to step in there and be a starter right away, be an impact player right away at 12, whether it's a corner, wide receiver, or what have you, or edge rusher. They can't afford, I think, to get a backup, some guy who might be a starter down the line with that first round pick. I don't think the fans would take very kindly to that.
Dave, one of your extra point columns over at 97.3 ESPN.com, we can transition a little bit here.
Sure.
Well, the last two, actually, were both about boxing. And, one was about, Holyfield Forum, which was a fun story to read for anybody who gets to go check that out over at 97.3 ESPN.com. But the story before that, you and I both had written about Claressa Shields last week. I was more about the PFL side. You were more about the boxing side for Claressa Shields. And what's interesting to me with her is that she's in a position to do something that we've never seen before. And that is she's endeavoring, not saying it's going to happen, but she's endeavoring to be a champion in both MMA and boxing. And what's interesting to me is that we've seen people try to make the transition from one side to another. But in your mind, what makes her and her opportunity different?
Well, she's got a lot of ability as far as, I mean, obviously as a fighter. I mean, she's just, she knows she's been in pressure situations. She's been at the top of boxing for a number of years now, not only from the Olympics, but as a pro, three division world champ. So she knows what it takes to succeed at a high level. I'd probably compare, I guess, to Holly Holm, who had some success as a boxer before having a lot of success as an MMA fighter. I think Claressa is going to find out, though, that the transition is not going to be as easy as she thinks. It's two entirely different sports, and I don't doubt the fact that she's doing everything she can to get ready for it. But until you've actually experienced, I think, being in a cage as opposed to a ring, having somebody kicking at you, trying to choke you out or what have you, it's going to be interesting to see how she handles that kind of adversity, that kind of pressure. I think she will, but they're going to bring her. They'll bring her along slowly, which they should until she gets more experience. But I'm not expecting her to be dominant right away as she is as a boxer.
Right, and I think that the way the PFL already has a precedent for what they did a couple of years ago with Kayla Harrison. They brought Kayla in. They started out very slowly, and then a year later they put her in with the regular competition. And I think they might. It seems like they're doing the same thing with Claressa. You mentioned Holly Holm. Holly Holm is one of the people that she is training with right now, Claressa. So I feel like there is a possibility that she has the opportunity to maybe be a little more successful than some other people have, because one of the things I find, and this is not a knock against the men, but I almost feel like with the men who have tried from boxing to MMA, they don't take it seriously enough. You know what I mean? It's almost like they think it's like a joke, or they don't understand the depth of what goes in the training for that. Whereas I feel like Claressa, for her to say, I'm going to go seek out Jackson MMA, I'm going to go seek out Holly Holm, it shows me her seriousness with this.
Yeah, you might be right there. I mean, there have been a lot of guys who probably went into it more of as a publicity stunt. Ray Mercer comes immediately to mind. And I was actually there for his so-called fight against Kimbo Slice. And it was clear that he had no idea what he was in for. Where Kimbo, which I guess if you're talking about guys who make the transition, I mean, he's basically a street fighter who did the work, worked out with Bas Rutten to learn MMA, and was really impressive in his short span as an MMA fighter. I think you're right. There's probably too many guys who looked at it just as an opportunity to gain some publicity rather than really put in the work the way that Claressa's doing.
Also, do you feel like part of this also is maybe her preparing, like having a backup plan? Because realistically, the women in MMA are having much more of a thriving success in terms of competition and in terms of options than boxing right now. Like I feel like if you
very true,
if you run into at least a competent MMA fan, they can name you numerous women's fighters. I feel like if I run into a competent boxing fan, they could name you a ton of men, but they could only name maybe like 2 women.
Right, Katie Taylor, Claressa are probably it. You might be onto something there, Josh. Claressa's options are very limited as far as boxing is concerned. Like you said, there aren't that many guys, not that many women out there that are at her level. She may have reached her peak as far as boxing is concerned. So, if there's a new avenue out there to explore, maybe some new opportunities, more money, more exposure, then why not give it a shot?
Yeah, and let's not forget that the next UFC pay-per-view, the co-main event and the event below them are 2 women's championship fights. So women in MMA are being promoted at a very high level. And between the UFC and the PFL, they've both shown a high aptitude to promote those women. So to me, if I'm Claressa, from a business sense as well, this might be a way to extend my professional athletic life here, because she is a very marketable individual. I think one of the best things about her is the fact that she is a young woman who understands the side of doing the interviews and doing the promotion and marketing and everything. Whereas I think for some other women, maybe they didn't fully grasp that concept.
Yeah, I guess the fact that she has so much experience at that, like you mentioned, to be a 2-time gold medalist, and so she's used to being in front of the camera. She's used to playing the game, I guess, in a way. She knows what it takes to drum up interest, to whether it's fans or pay-per-view, which really didn't do that well, I don't think, her last pay-per-view fight. So, but yeah, she knows what it takes to publicize herself and the sport. So I think that bodes well for her in MMA, I think.
Dave Weinberg, Weinberg Wednesday here on 97.3 ESPN at Dave Weinberg 19. Check out both of his most recent Extra Point columns over at 97.3 ESPN.com. Both great reads. Dave, before I let you go, I got to ask you, when Mike Trout hit that home run that was the fastest exit velocity of the last 8 years in Major League Baseball, your reaction was what the other night?
What is exit velocity? I just don't, I don't get it. The ball leaves the yard. I don't care how fast it goes out. And I don't care how far it goes. As long as it's over that fence, it counts the same as a 500-foot home run counts the same as a 400-foot home run. Exit velocity, I just don't. I know I'm old. I just turned 63 the other day, and I'm get off my lawn, that kind of stuff. But I just don't understand the point of some of these things. Launch angle, exit velocity. Just give me batting average, home runs, RBIs, and call it a day.
Well, I'm sorry to report that Mike Trout is now hitting under 400 now. So he's only batting, I think, 385. So he's
got to go catch Ted Williams now. Okay. Right.
Yeah, he's got to keep up with Ted. Dave Weinberg here on 97.3 ESPN, as he does every Wednesday. Weinberg Wednesday here on Game Night, and as all guests, he appeared on the Boardwalk on Hotline. Dave, I appreciate you jumping on the conversation today.
Well, thanks, Jeff. I appreciate you having me as always.